Hello there, this is Irina in my channel Enough. Today I'm saying enough of slavery and enough of slave mentality, not only in Russia but everywhere. For people who doesn't know me yet, I'll introduce myself. I'm Elina. I used to teach in several Russian universities. I'm economist, and I was talking about stocks and economics and so on. I lived in three countries. I lived in two dictatorships like USSR and Russia. And now I live in free country Canada for 18 years, over 18 years. I travel a lot around the world and mostly in North America. And I have readers and subscribers from all over the world, over 30 countries, all over Russia, all over Ukraine. So when I'm talking about the war in Ukraine, I did a deep research since 2013 and know a lot about Maidan and about what actually happened in Ukraine and about Russian aggression in Ukraine. And I have experience of talking to several FSB officers, KGB at the time in USSR. So about politics and about lots of other things. I have deep knowledge about different things and personal experience of living in USSR, working in USSR and Russia, and studying and teaching in Russian universities, and now traveling through lots of democratic countries and through my subscribers and my readers, because I'm author now and I write mysteries, and also wrote a political book which I published in 2017 talking about future of Russia and the war in Ukraine, a little bit in that book, but much more now on my channel. And my channel is about 5 months old. There's already a lot of views and over 30,000, and I have over 70,000 views on Quora as well. So this is my background, and that's why my point of view and my knowledge could be useful for you. I hope if you want to know more about me, there is a video about me, and that's how it's called, and also a video about guide to my YouTube channel, which I created. So let's dive in. Let's talk about Putin's zombies, Gorbachev's Perestroika, and the war in Ukraine. And we're gonna answer a question today: are Russians slaves? Because I heard that quite a bit, and I see the people in other countries really don't understand what is happening in Russia and why some Russians, still trust Putin. We're gonna talk about it today and find out. First of all, I want to tell you a joke. Hopefully I can translate it well. Because Soviet and Russian propaganda often make villains kind of out of foreign people and Americans in particular. And it never stopped, actually. That propaganda never stopped. So even during Perestroika time. So during Perestroika, there was a joke about some Americans came to Russia trying to help Russians to rebuild their country, to become more efficient and so on. And they bought a plant, a factory there, and started to help Russians, but it didn't work out very well, and they decided maybe something to do with Russian mentality. Let's conduct an experiment. And they kind of decided, invited Russians, the employees into the big hall. Russian call it usually like a special hall for meetings and so on. So when they say to Russians, okay, the plant isn't doing very well, so we decided we're gonna pay you from now on just a half of your salary. And nobody reacted, nobody said anything. Next day, Russians came back and employees working, everybody things like normal and everything. Okay, decided Americans, let's push it further. The next day, they again arranged a meeting and said, well, it didn't help, whatever, reduced your salary, so I guess you guys gonna have to work for free. Okay, next day, Russians showed up and they're working, nothing happening. Well, decided Americans, let's push them even further. And they said, well, okay, now we're thinking we probably need to raise money from you guys just to make sure our factory works and you guys will have a job to have and so on. Okay, everybody raised money, whatever they can, and brought next day some money. So they work in there and they pay the factory that they work there. Okay, well, Americans decided, is there a limit of that submissiveness? Let's check it further. And they say, well, guys, we're just thinking the employees are the problem. So we decided and made a law inside our factory. Come to work tomorrow, we're gonna hang you. We're gonna execute you all. And then one hand was raised, just very meek and mild. And they said, okay, Ivanov, what do you think? What do you want to ask? Excuse me, said Ivanov, Mr. Ivanov. I'm terribly sorry. Could you please specify, do we supposed to bring the ropes or our trade union will provide it for hanging? So they decided to bring their own ropes to be hanged on. It would have been funny if it wouldn't be so sad, because right now this is what's happening in Ukraine. Russian soldiers, mobilized by Putin to the army, they basically taking loans in the bank, and their families taking loans to equip Russian army, to get them dressed, buying them everything, include like underwear, and their boots, and they're trying to provide them with body armor, with anything, with medication. I had a video when they was suggested use the tampons women using for hygienic reasons, because they say, well, if you get shot, you just plug it with a tampon and it's gonna stop the bleeding or something. So it's not all that funny. But again, they were blaming Americans, but yet they made such a joke. I hope I translated well and you understand what I'm talking about. Sometimes jokes are hard to translate, so I apologize for that. And let's start a little bit from the history. This is a Russian Tsar, Alexander II. They called him Tsar Alexander the Liberator. As some of you probably know a little bit of Russian history, that in Russia there used to be slavery. It's called serfdom, and крепостное право it's called in Russia. And eventually, in 1861, the Tsar, Alexander II, liberated the slaves and abolished the slavery and serfdom, when Russian peasants could be sold and bought. Sometimes family gets sold to 3 different owners. Somebody buying a wife, somebody buying a husband, and somebody buying a child or children, and so on. The Russian slave owners could beat them up. They could do whatever they please with them. And that's the Russian Tsar who actually liberated them. And yet, some Russian slaves didn't want to leave their masters. They just didn't know what to do with their freedom. They just decided, well, they're gonna stay, and they just would get paid somewhat, but as a free man, but they still would be working for the same owner. But some were really happy and moved to the cities and become workers and so on. That's what happened in 1861. There is another joke from one of my favorite mystery writers. I'm a mystery writer myself, and Daria Dontsova, there is such a Russian writer who had a joke in her books about that liberation of the slaves, when students of the university who study history having an exam, and the boy didn't know the answer, and asking the girl, hey, Masha, could you please tell me when the slavery was abolished in Russia? And she said, in 61. And a guy didn't know all that, and he was saying, well, what was happened earlier? Gagarin flew into space, or the slavery was abolished? So he kind of mixed up 1961 and 1861. Plus minus 100 years, no big deal. And so this is how it all started, somewhat freedom in Russia, but yet, according to Nikolai Petrov, I happened to read his book from 1913. It was like a real antique book printed in Tsar time and so on. So this man was a statesman and a famous statesman and even a member of a state council of Russian Empire. And he was saying that even in 1913, before the Bolshevik Revolution, I'm saying, Russian peasants were very much kind of like slaves. Many of them were apathetic and uneducated completely. Many of them couldn't know how to read and really didn't care about the results of their labor and so on. So before the revolution, Bolshevik Revolution, also in Russia, lots of people were not just uneducated, but really didn't care for freedom or anything like that. And eventually some of them moved to the factories and so on and started to have somewhat free time because their labor was more about machines, operating the machines and so on. And eventually people started to be more care about what is actually happening to them and how can they influence the situation. As right now, before talking a little bit more about slavery and slave mentality, I want to show you the results of some polls done in Russia right now. And the situation in Russia is not as bad as you may think. This is what Putin's propaganda trying to tell Russians and trying to tell people abroad, that he has overwhelming support and everything is so great. It is not. This is the Chronicles. They did a express survey about mobilization. And they surveyed over 1,000 Russian citizens by randomly selected mobile numbers on September 21st and 22nd. And held the same survey among the other 800 respondents on September 28th to 29th to learn that we also interested about dynamics. We're not interested in just exact numbers. We're interested in tendencies. So according to the survey, declared support for the special operation, so-called, or a war in Ukraine, continues to fall and once again reach historic minimum. And that's what they find out. About 25 to 26% are militarists who supporting the special operation. We're gonna go get them. 17 to 18%, which is about almost the same. It's open pacifists who doesn't want to fight. And some of them, like 73%, watch TV and believe that they personally will not be affected. But support for the war continues to fall. And the numbers we're talking about, those three groups, militarists, open pacifists, and loyalists who support any decision of the authorities. Let's see. We're talking about the people who actually agreed to respond, to answer the questions of the survey on the phone. Even then, they were openly, some people said that they're not supporting. They wasn't afraid to answer that question. Even there was question saying I'm refused to answer. Yet some people, it's about 17 to 18%. And how many people actually agree to answer survey? According to famous politician and political scientist Ekaterina Shulman, she isn't, as she said also, she is not a sociologist, but she knows that in sociological polls, in Russia, about only 2.5% of people actually agree to answer the questions. So there is no overwhelming support of Putin among Russians. Out of that amount, like 2.5% of Russians who actually agreed to answer the question, out of them 25 to 26% support. And it is dropping with time, according to several surveys and stuff like that. And yet, some people openly still say that no, we don't support that. And also there is interesting surveys done by other people, and there is interesting video by Maxim Katz and his channel. That's what he's saying also.
Опять же, цифры в разных опросах могут отличаться, но нам важнее динамика. А она такова: количество милитаристов и пацифистов выравнивается с каждым месяцем. В вопросе Russian Field это тоже заметно. В недавней социологии там то же самое. Сторонников мира с Украиной становится больше, а сторонников эскалации меньше. У тех же исследователей из Russian Field при немного другой формулировке видно: продолжать спецоперацию хочет примерно столько же опрошенных, сколько желают перехода к мирным переговорам. Методология у Russian Field другая, вопросы отличаются, но тенденция такая же.
So many people are trying to say that they don't want special operation, and it's about, from the people who actually agreed to answer the questions, it's about the same amount of people for the special operation and or a war in Ukraine and against. And the amount of supporters reducing. So there is no that overwhelming support, but yet there are people who really brainwashed and who truly believe that they are not good enough to make important decisions and let government decide for them and so on, because apparently government is smarter than them and so on. I would say there was some I can show you some of them, so you know who we're talking about and why people in the foreign countries thinking that that Russians are basically submissive slaves. This was in Ryazan city. It's about 120 miles south from Moscow. Let's see what that woman saying. That channel is 1420. Interesting channel who does talking to Russians and trying to find out what they thinking.
Ты сидишь дома, чай пьешь, а он в грязи вот сейчас ползает. Поэтому здесь вот, ну, двоякое мнение. Но все равно нужно вставать на позицию.
Зачем вот наших людей, наших парней молодых
Так,
отправлять?
что вы предлагаете?
Не отправлять их туда.
Не отправлять?
Да.
Сесть все вместе, вы у себя дома, я у себя дома, и пусть нас тут. Потом эти приходят, нацики, там как их называют, нацики, фигацки, и пусть насилуют, пусть уродуют, пусть... Вы этого хотите? Я, например, этого не хочу.
Думаете, нацики не могут прийти?
Ну, я имею в виду, начали-то с Украины, а получается, что не Украина уже с нами воюет, а воюет уже НАТО.
So this woman believed the whole propaganda, hook, line and sinker, that they fighting not in Ukraine, they fighting NATO, that the Nazis will come and gonna rape people in Russia, women and so on.
Ну вот я поэтому и говорю, что я не смотрю этот телевизор, он уже...
So that's what her opinion. This is young man from Moscow. Also very interesting to hear what he has to say.
Слушай, мы не проиграем.
Почему?
Потому что я уверен в России. Все будет правильно. Очень грустно, конечно, что люди умирают, которые просто мирные жители. Но с точки зрения такой геополитики, сужу опять-таки, не знаю, основываясь на фейках или нет, но скорее я поддерживаю. Но опять-таки лишняя смерть это очень плохо.
А почему поддерживаете?
Потому что, ну опять-таки, это же Украина, она, как это назвать-то? Штаб НАТО будет там, ну, вот как так не могу описать точно. Я очень головой думаю сейчас.
Ну, то есть, например, вот появилась в Украине база НАТО. Неужели из-за этого есть какая-то опасность для России?
Мне кажется, есть, раз это сделали.
То есть у нас же есть ядерное оружие.
Но если начали,
нападать на ядерную державу.
Мне кажется, вот такие вот приземленные люди, они меньше понимают, чем там наверху. И у нас просто нету всей информации. И, наверное, не знаю, что делают.
Наоборот, не страшно, что все-таки они могут ошибаться, они же тоже люди, они какие-то там сверхразумы.
Они, во всяком случае, понимают больше, чем мы с вами. Поэтому, ну, я полагаюсь на них, надеюсь, что будет все хорошо.
А почему думаете, что они больше понимают?
Потому что у них огромный опыт. Они пережили достаточно много таких моментов Афганистана и все остальное.
Но все равно человек же, он остается человеком всегда, и им движут какие-то там биологические процессы, там эгоизм?
Я думаю, люди на таких постах, они меньше привержены этому все-таки.
В смысле, что уже у них все есть и нет
У них
смысла?
выработалось такое отношение не личное, а профессиональное. То есть они понимают, что нужно делать в конкретной ситуации. Они не поддаются эмоциям и всему вот этому.
Почему так думаете?
Ну, личное мое мнение. Я вот так вот думаю.
Мгм. Ну, если вот начнется, вернее, как начнется, если вас коснется мобилизация, пойдете?
Ну, если именно вот так вот добровольно, конечно, не хочется, но если всех загребут, то да.
Ну, страшно же, там, возможно, умереть придется, возможно,
что
инвалидом стать, ногу потерять, руку. Ужасно.
Ну, такая вот цена защиты Родины. Если не я, то кто? Также, ну, если я откажусь, также будут отказываться все остальные, все будут улетать за границу, и что тогда останется от России?
So he's so worried about Russia. Nobody attacked Russia. Nobody came to Russia. Nobody did anything bad to Russia. But yeah, what's gonna happen? What else could I do? Of course, people above me know more. And this kind of garbage in the head of that young man who look intelligent and doesn't look in any way, I don't know, special needs or anything. That's what kind of garbage in his head. This is young person, and the lady was older, but she probably remember USSR and being brainwashed there and so on. So let's see why is that. Some people thinking that maybe it's genetics, maybe it's natural selection of some sort, which they might have a point because during many years, even since Tsar time, the many intelligent people left Russia, and especially during the revolution, when they were basically murdered by Russian Bolshevik government. And even right now, since even mobilization started, over 700,000 people, intelligent people, programmers and everything, left Russia and so on. So I can see they thinking they have a point, and let's look further in what's happening. We will probably find out more about we will find out more about it later in this video. So let's talk about brainwashing. In USSR, brainwashing was very intense. And after I see the book of Mr. Dworkin about cults and totalitarian cults and so on, I found out that USSR is very much resembles a cult, which is an organization basically which put in danger life of people by activity of that organization, by brainwashing people extensively, controlling the information people get, which was very heavily controlled in USSR. At least now we have internet, we have YouTube, we have lots of other ways to get information. Even in Russia, for many years during Putin's regime, the information was started to be more and more controlled by Russian government, and people start to have less and less ways to get information, at least not on official TV or anything. And since starting full-scale invasion in Ukraine, completely was shut down all the main. There are no independent sources of information in Russia. Everybody abroad now, or in jail. But still, this young man, grew up in a time when he can and he still can get real information, facts and so on from internet. Yet he choose not to. He choose to believe propaganda, and this is very, very bad. And according to the book about the cults and so on, exactly lots of people who is very young and who is about over 60 years old, kind of more susceptible for the information and propaganda, because they are kind of tend to look, at least in Russia, they tend to look for simple answers to the difficult questions. So this man obviously wrong, but that's what he believed, that's what he said his opinion is. And propaganda in USSR was very intense. I have on my channel the whole video about that. It says propaganda from USSR to Putin's Russia, where I kind of more explaining about that. It's called Propaganda from USSR to Putin's Russia, USSR, the Empire of Evil is Back, Part 2. So you're welcome to see that. And as to Putin's time, Putin didn't stop propaganda, neither did Gorbachev. Before we will talk about Putin, I think I want to tell you a couple more things about Gorbachev time. Perestroika and glasnost, it was all sound very good, but truth to be told, and many foreign people believe that Russians get the freedom, but they didn't appreciate it and they give it up. In fact, I lived in that time. We didn't actually get a freedom. Yeah, we had an illusion of freedom. We had glasnost, which is we could say anything we want. We started to get real information about Russian past and Russian history, about what terrible monster was USSR, started to have it. We started to talk about gulags and Stalin's gulags, and lots of foreign scientists were allowed to Russian archives like Anne Applebaum and so on. But many Russians, because Gorbachev did not want to destroy USSR, he wanted to keep it. Yeah, he did a lot of stuff which actually ended USSR, but that wasn't his idea. That's not what he wanted. And the facts saying that, for instance, academic Sakharov still was in exile. Yeah, we had freedom of speech, but people didn't actually have the freedom. Even me, I remember myself in grade 10 when I wrote an essay for my history lesson, and my history teacher was invited to the local Communist Party committee, which he kind of get punished because I wrote in my essay some sort of a critical something about the Communist Party. That's how much freedom we had. Yeah, we had illusion, and I thought we can now say what we think, right? Apparently, not so much. But the smell of that freedom, the sense of that freedom, just because we can say anything, was so overwhelming that when there was debates or was some sort of a political things were happening on TV, streets get dead. Basically, like at the time we started to have foreign TV shows, soap operas, like Santa Barbara is very famous in Russia. Many people never heard of it in foreign countries, even in America the show is made. And actually there was Robin Wright Penn in it and so on, Lane Davis, and many actors Russians know and love. Many people abroad hardly ever heard of it. It's kind of like a dynasty. And when I actually visited the city of Santa Barbara, all I wanted to see the mostly mission, whether it kind of was appeared in the show and stuff like that, because it was that important. Like streets get dead, like people run to certain time home because Santa Barbara was on TV. But thanks to Gorbachev, at the time we had more freedom, and the streets got dead when there was something political going on TV. People wanted to know the truth, people wanted to know facts, people wanted to know more. Unfortunately, the economy was going down, and it wasn't the fault of Gorbachev as many Russians believed. They believed that Gorbachev destroyed USSR, that he destroyed Russian economy. No, it was an inefficient cardboard economy, which was USSR was going down, Gorbachev or not. It could have been faster, it could have been slower. It just happened because of inefficient economy, because USSR could not keep up with the arm race, and Gorbachev tried to slow it down or stop it, but he couldn't. He also didn't want to do unpopular decisions like raising taxes or raising prices. He tried to keep down both, and you cannot tell economy what to do. You cannot just command the economy. Yeah, like Belarusian dictator Lukashenko trying to do. He ordered prices not to go up. Gorbachev couldn't hold the economy. He couldn't hold the country because it was going to collapse anyway. It sounds like something like that was trying to do Liz Truss. That's why she couldn't keep her post of Prime Minister of UK. Because economy is a science. Economics is a science. That's why it is science. It's acting. There are laws of that science. Kind of like laws of nature. It's acting independently of willpower of people. The sun gonna come on the sky no matter you want it or not. Because this is a law of nature. So is the law of economics. Sorry. Politicians could promise anything they want, but the laws of economics gonna work independently of their willpower. And, well, they can lie to you. But if you only have $5 in your pocket, and you put it from your right pocket to your left pocket, you're not gonna have more money. You will just have the same $5. They're not gonna magically multiply inside your pocket. I'm telling you that as an economist. So anyways, during Gorbachev time, a little bit slowed down propaganda, but it still was there. KGB still was there. It was working. It was coming to my university, and I actually met them. I saw them myself, personally. So brainwashing and propaganda didn't stop during Gorbachev, and definitely didn't stop after him, and even increased during Putin time. Increased so much, especially after 2014, after Russia started aggression in Ukraine and took Crimea, annexed Crimea. That is why all that lies of USSR, and Russians didn't even know that they lost the Cold War. They just thought, it kind of stopped somehow. They didn't know USSR lost. They didn't know USSR was an evil empire who was murdering its own people and people abroad. They didn't know they lost the Cold War, and the economy failure was the fault of USSR. It wasn't the fault of Gorbachev. That's why many Russians hate Gorbachev. But in time of Putin, the propaganda increased, especially after invasion in Ukraine. This is one of the show I wanted to show. It's a Popular Politics, the channel made by Navalny. Navalny group. It's called Zombie Box. 8 years of degradation of propaganda with Ilya Shepelin. This is what Russians see on their TVs.
А не о ее деградации, как написано у нас в заголовке. Но какое же там может быть развитие, когда тут сплошной деградач? Мерзавец, фотографии покажи! Ты фотографии самовара кого-то показываешь! Ну и зрители на это...
So basically, Russians see lots of propaganda on their TV, and that is why people appear like we saw just now, that young man and the lady. What I want to show you now, how bad propaganda was this last 8 years. Russian people were bombarded every day with propaganda from every sources, like social media, TV. You just saw that clip I showed you just now. This is what they see on TV when they invited fake experts, some sort of an American who is absolutely nobody and not expert in anything, but just because he's an American or pretend to be American or something, and that's what Russian people see. Also, they see in social networks, in many other places, they see fake information, and Ukrainians were smart enough to disprove it. They created site stopfake.org, which was in about 2014 when there was a war in Ukraine. This particular video has 75 pieces like that of propaganda. I'll just show you a few. This one is number 35. They were so lazy that they took a picture of burning Canadian city like Megantic when there was a train crash, actually like from Wikipedia or something, and pretend that it's a city Slavyansk in Ukraine. It's on the territory of those so-called on the Donbass territory.
Sometimes the Russian media who accompany the military can be a bit lazy, so instead of taking photographs of their own explosions on this day, they use this one from a Canadian train crash. Now we're about halfway through.
So this is just one of the examples. Now I'll show you another one. Somewhere here. There. This is number 23. They showing, oh, Ukrainian government did not, that the Ukrainian government created the fire, burning down crops to create famine in Ukraine. Oh, it's just so awful. Turned out to be they took a picture from a Volgograd region of Russia, which happened to have a fire on the field.
23. Tuh. This kind of news is designed to make people think Kiev hates people.
This says, near Volgograd, it's July 2nd of 2014. Near Volgograd was burned for hectares of wheat. Kotelnikovo, it's a place in Volgograd region, Rio Federal Press. And talking about that they were fighting the fire and so on. And now they're checking out why the fire happened, and at this point they can say it's just it just was an accident. I actually find what I did, I verified at the time all that information. I find this particular article, and I know people from Volgograd region personally and so on, so I can verify that type of stuff. And the next one was so in this, only in one video, was about 75 pieces like that. And everything, Putin's propaganda at the time found out the good idea to call Ukrainian government Nazis, because it works very well as a propaganda tool, because Russians after the World War II really hate that word, and they hate Nazis and fascists. So the war in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea wasn't as popular as they thought it gonna be. So they decided to make Nazis out of Ukrainians. And I have a video disproving all of this as well on my channel, but let's see what else they have. These pieces. They claiming this is dead bodies in Ukraine in 2014. No, it was Chechnya. Russian people, Putin's regime, and before him was fighting the war in Chechnya. It's a part of, used to be part of Russian Federation. So in 1995, this is what was happening in Chechnya.
She has lots of them. 12.
And the next one, again, they claiming it's Slaviansk Ukraine. No, it's not. It's Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia was serial pedophile murderer was killed. His head was chopped off and he was crucified. So taking pictures, and I personally seen the picture of the wounded boy, which they say, oh, it's in Ukraine. No, it's not. I find the article, it was in Syria, and it was in the newspaper, and so on. The same exact picture and so on. That's what Ukrainians did back in 2014, trying to disproving piece by piece all of this. Buckets of that information, fake information, was dumped on Russian people, trying to blame Ukraine, blame NATO, blame everybody. That is why partly some people easily believe it what's happening now, because they've seen it for over 8 years, almost every day, here or there or anywhere, in newspapers and Facebook, anywhere. Worse than that, there was another piece. There.
To flee into Russia.
This woman claimed to be Galina Pushniak from Rostov region. She was so passionately saying
set up huge tent areas in Rostov
about the boy in Slaviansk Ukraine who was crucified, and it was so awful, and that's why lots of refugees are running back to this video. Actually in English, I'll give you the link, you can watch it if you like. And boy, oh boy, how horrible it all is and so on. Turned out to be it's complete lie. made up story, never happened, because exactly the same time there was Russian journalist from Novaya Gazeta, in a newspaper in there, and then
Nobody in Slavyansk
she
backs
doesn't
up this
even
idea
know
or even knows this woman.
the name. She's an actor. Actually, she happened to be in several propagandist videos later on, like as I find out and I seen it in other places, not just about that piece. So she wasn't even aware that the central square in Slavyansk isn't Lenin Square, but October Revolution Square,
And she got the name of the city square wrong and some other details.
and didn't know that there was no coal miners as well as coal mining industry in Slavyansk and so on. So she
about
wasn't
the
from
city
there,
wrong
she
as
was
well.
just an actor.
But, you know, great acting.
And after that, people
Now,
were
not long
talking
after
to
this story was
some journalists were
but this
talking to
guy
some
here
ladies
went into the city
from actual
centre
Slavyansk
where the
city,
event was set
and
to
they said
happen.
no, it didn't
So he had a
happen,
chat with some
but it was
people,
very famous,
in the park to find out what
fake,
they
made up by
knew
Russian
about this.
propaganda.
Well, so here, basically, various locals in the square.
So I
say no
confirmed it,
such
and
thing
I
could
verified
happen
that
without
information even
the
back then,
information
because it was
spreading to
very
everybody and everyone
scary
knowing about it.
information. They
They've
say, yeah,
never heard
nothing
of
like
such
that
an
happened,
event.
and so on. So Russians were fed a lot of lies and a lot of propaganda. And yet, many of them, in Ryazan city, for instance, there are people who doesn't believe to Russian propaganda.
Про то, что в центральной области, в
Hands free.
южной объявили режим повышенной готовности. А вот территориях, которые недавно присоединились к нам, вообще военное положение. Что думаете по этому поводу?
Отрицательно думаю, как во всем этом бардаке.
Почему?
Ну, потому что как бы превращение моей родины в Третий Рейх — это не очень хорошая идея. Я как бы хочу, чтобы мои дети жили в свободном государстве, где есть социальные лифты, где есть сменяемость власти и вообще нормальная жизнь человека.
Ну вот, а представляете сейчас, вот нам изначально говорили, то, что никакой мобилизации не будет, что это небольшая какая-то спецоперация по уничтожению нацистов в Украине, потом хопа, мобилизация. Вот, теперь нам говорят то, что вот только вот в отдельных частях там военное положение ввели. Дальше не могут, как думаете, вести во всей России?
Естественно, это же проба пера, как бы. То, что государство делает то, что ты разрешаешь ему делать, как гражданин. Наши граждане разрешили государству делать вот такую, как бы, подлость, с моей точки зрения, да? Ну, значит, они будут дальше подло относиться и к гражданам других государств, и к своим.
So this man from Ryazan know what he's talking about, so he think as well as much as any other good person in any other normal democratic country. So basically there are not as many Russian slaves as Putin claims to be, but yet there are quite a few, and I run in some of them myself, partly on my channel, partly in person, like my own relatives, some of them that way, who believe what Putin says and making everybody else such an evil people, include me, that that imperial thinking and imperial ambition really strong in Russia, and many people really believe that they are better than Ukrainians. But these people still not the majority. Majority of people, if they would have a chance to speak freely, I don't believe they would have started the war or do something like that. That is why I'm still doing videos on my channel and trying to provide facts and information for people can actually to talk to other people who believe otherwise, who believe Putin, and have a facts to disprove his lies. I hope that helps. And beside of these people with kind of who are brainwashed, in Russia there are actual real slaves. This is an article of Moscow Times. About 800,000 of them, 794,000 in 2018. Modern day slaves are living in Russia. This report is talking about human trafficking and about forced labor and debt bondage and so on. They basically base the article on the company and the Global Slavery Index done by Mahindra Foundation's Walk Free Initiative, who is independent, privately funded international human rights organization based in Australia. And they calculated that global slavery index in Russia is not doing well. About, I was talking 2016 and so on, almost 800,000 people who actually slaves in Russia. Some of them from different countries like Uzbekistan or even North Korea, believe it or not. Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Ukraine, Vietnam, China, and North Korea. Some of them, North Korean workers were used to construct stadium for 2018 Soccer World Cup, for instance, and so on. And this is also disgusting. One thing is to have a slave mentality, and another thing is to be actual real slave who doesn't have rights, doesn't have passport, and used as a actual slave. It was estimated more than 50,000 North Korean migrants workers apparently to Russia and to China, and they used them as slaves. Here's the video about some gentlemen in Uzbekistan, from Uzbekistan, in the war in Ukraine.
С Узбекистана приехала, блядь.
Вдвоем. Москва была, отправлена туда.
С Москвы?
Да, без документов было, работали, стройка, сюда отправил.
Я понял. В машине сколько? Откуда?
Узбекистан.
Узбекистан, блядь.
So this man from Uzbekistan, he was working illegally in Moscow on the construction site, and he was grabbed and thrown in the army and ended up in Ukraine. And right now Ukrainians are questioning him. So this was a YouTube channel of Chris O. Not YouTube, sorry, Twitter. So this is what's happening in Russia. Partly there are real slaves, apparently, actual slaves, and partly there are people with slave mentality. But the fact that Putin getting rid of opposition, he got rid of a free press, and he publishing more and more laws depriving Russians of freedoms and increasing the sentences for disobeying him and for calling war a war, and putting people in jail for standing up against him and his regime. This fact proving that it's not many people supporting him. That is why he need to increase all of this. He need to increase political pressure. He need to increase pressure by law. He need to increase repressions. It's saying that Russians are still fighting on the on their places, and Russians are, majority of Russians anyways, not supporting him. So I don't think Russians are slaves, but yes, I do know that there are quite a few Russians, a lot of them, who believe Putin, and they have that slave mentality, and they believe that nothing gonna change and nothing you can do anyway, and you have to obey the rulers because they know better. And it is a very tricky question. Yes, there are Russian slaves, there are actual slaves, and there are people with slave mentality in Russia. That is true. And yet there are free people in Russia, free thinkers, like we just saw that gentleman from Resign. And my goal is to support people who free thinking, who want the better future for my country, Russia, one of my two countries. And ideally I want Russia eventually live like Canada, not the other way around. Not Canada live like Russia, God forbid. That is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and my videos, I'm making my videos on my channel. And please educate yourself. Please don't allow yourself to turn into slaves. Either like this man, or like that young gentleman who is talking about that rulers have rights, and the rulers know better, and we all should obey and do whatever they say. Do not let your country turn into Russia, no matter what country it is. Yeah, could be worse, I guess. But if you live in democratic country, if you live in ex-country of USSR or USSR influenced country, please educate yourself. Find out what's wrong was with USSR. Find out about propaganda. And find out the actual true facts about the war in Ukraine. And that is why I made my channel, and you're welcome to use it. This is one of the places you can go for the actual true information about the war in Ukraine and about USSR, about KGB, and about lots of other things. Please educate yourself. Have a great day or evening. Thank you for watching, and thank you for supporting my channel. Please like and subscribe and help me to spread the truth. Please help Ukraine. See you later.